Hey guys, thanks for joining. I think we're going to give maybe another minute or two to see if anybody else jumps on. It's great to see everybody. Hello, Alexis. It's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Let me see.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last CUSOTA meeting of the 2019-2020 school year. I'm just going to give a brief presentation on some updates, and then I will pass it on to our guest speaker for today. So I'm just going to give a quick update on meeting attendance, dean's reimbursement, honors cords, volunteering. I'm going to introduce the new Regis CUSOTA exec team, give a quick thank you, and then we'll get to the guest speaker. CUSOTA meeting attendance, please follow this link. If you're attending this meeting live right now, you still need to log your attendance using the link. Please let me know if for some reason the link is not working. And if you are watching this meeting at a later time, please log in your attendance using this link as well. You have 1 week from today to turn in this attendance. So your attendance will be due on April 29th. And again, this is the last meeting. Dean's reimbursement, kind of what I talked about last meeting. The campus CUSOTA team is still trying to figure out details for Dean's reimbursement this year. Be on the lookout for updates, and please just know that we really appreciate your time and commitment to all of the volunteer events that we had to do this year. Honors cords information, nothing has changed. Class of 2020 and class of 2021, you just have to have 30 hours of volunteering before you graduate. And then class of 2022 and beyond, you have to be a member in good standing all 3 years. Membership dues have to be paid every single year by the October due date. You must attend 6 out of the 9 meetings each year, and again, get 30 hours of volunteering. Volunteering, I want to give a shout out to Jillian. She has been in contact with an organization called A Little Help. They're out of Denver, and they have offered volunteering services to help homebound and immunocompromised individuals within the community by getting groceries, by picking up prescriptions, or just calling and checking in on them and seeing how they're doing. So please visit the link that I have provided to sign up and figure out if there's any possible way that you guys can do that. If you guys go and get groceries and it takes a couple hours, I can give you those hours. If you just call to chat with them, I can at least give you half an hour of volunteering for that. But this is a great opportunity, so check it out. And then from the campus CUSOTA team, you can make a YouTube video and send it to schools or outpatient clinics, doing different exercises or interventions. Kind of just get creative, and you can get one volunteer hour for 20 to 30-minute video, and then 2 hours if you make a longer video than that. Just send me the link of the video, and we can't wait to see how creative you guys get. And now introducing the new exec team. Our president is Mackenzie. Our vice president is Ellie. And our secretary is Caitlin. So congratulations to you three. We're very excited to see what you guys have in store for CUSOTA for the next year. And to wrap things up, I just want to give a big thank you from the entire Regis CUSOTA exec team. Thank you guys for an amazing year. We have done so much volunteering, and we've made some great memories along the way. So thank you guys for allowing us to be in these positions and to do what we do and do what we love. So thank you all. And now I would like to pass on the presentation to our guest speaker.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know Zoom very well, so I apologize ahead of time. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Oh, can you enable that?
Oh, yes. Let's see. Okay, let's see if that worked.
Got it. All right. Let's see here. Hopefully that shows.
Yes, it does.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So my name is Alexis Miller-Rush. I'm an OT and an ATP, Assistive Technology Professional. I work for New Motion, so I actually had to put on the New Motion header for copyright reasons, I guess. I don't know. Don't ask me. But anyways, I am an occupational therapist and an assistive technology professional. I've been an occupational therapist for about 16 years now, almost 17. And then I've been an assistive technology professional for the past 5. Let's see here. And go. All right, there we go. So from what I understand, you guys just want to know a little bit about what an ATP does and how it interacts with OT and how an OT might become an ATP. So if any of this information is too much or too little, feel free to holler at me. I'm happy to answer questions. This is nothing formal for me. I just wanted you to have something to actually look at besides my pretty face. So ATP, Assistive Technology Professional. And according to our accrediting body, the RESNA, we analyze the needs of consumers with disabilities, assisting in the selection of appropriate assistive technology for the consumer's needs and providing training in the use of the selected devices. Okay, so if you were to want to become an assistive technology professional, if you have your master's, which I believe everybody graduating for this program at least has their master's, if not their doctorate, you would have 1,000 hours of experience in assistive technology within the past 6 years. A bachelor's, which is where I started. I was actually just graduated with my doctorate this past year, but I was a bachelor's going into the assistive technology field, and I needed 1,500 hours of practice in rehabilitation technology. And if you have an associate's, it's 3,000. If you have a high school diploma, it's 30 hours of assistive technology training, plus then 6,000 hours of experience in 10 years. So assistive technology professionals, we are specialized usually either in complex rehabilitation technology or in AAC, augmentative and alternative communication. Me particularly, I specialize in wheelchairs and other mobility related equipment. You can be an occupational therapist, you can be a physical therapist, you can be a speech therapist, before you become an ATP. But there's many other different routes that people come into the field. They can be bachelors in bioscience of some sort. They can be kinesiotherapists. They can be rehabilitation engineers. They can be regular engineers, just about anything. As long as something usually has brought you to this field. So a lot of people who have higher education do actually study something related to assistive technology. But there are many people who just have their high school degree, came into the field as a tech of some sort, whether they repaired wheelchairs, built wheelchairs, what have you, and have grown up in the industry. So there are a lot of ATPs that actually don't have a college degree or have an associate's in something else that have taken a job with a company such as New Motion and have grown up in the industry. So the interaction is very dynamic between the OT or PT and an ATP because we have such similar views. So if you're coming from just an engineer's perspective, you're looking at a person and their physiology, if you will. You're looking at their dimensions. You're looking at how a piece of equipment would interface with their body. But as an occupational therapist, I also look at mobility related ADLs. I look at how that piece of equipment is going to integrate into their life and how it's going to promote their independence. So it's a very interesting dynamic. If you know a lot about occupational therapy, and then you're the ATP to an occupational therapist, there's a lot of overlapping knowledge. But if you come across somebody who does not know much about assistive technology or wheelchairs or standers and such, then that interaction becomes much more of an educational interaction as well as a conversation. So it's really guided by the therapist, and the ATP is the equipment specialist that an OT would more say, hey, they need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And the ATP would come in with the equipment recommendations to meet those needs. As an OT, a lot of times I also see the need and relate that to equipment needs as well. So assistive technology professionals who specialize in complex rehabilitation equipment, complex rehabilitation technology, don't really deal with things that you can buy on Amazon.com, hence the basic wheelchair with big X through it. That is not something that I would provide or be involved with, but somebody who is very highly active and independent in their mobility, yes, I will make a wheelchair that promotes their optimal independence, protects their shoulders, protects their mobility for a lifetime. I also deal with people who are completely dependent but have a lot of seating and positioning needs, such as the wheelchair on the bottom left-hand corner. I do work with very interesting pieces of technology, such as wheelchairs that can stand up, wheelchairs that can lift you up for increased access to your environment. If you actually notice, this guy in the bottom right-hand corner, he actually works for Quantum, that rehabilitation equipment company, but I think he was in one of the movies recently, the American Sniper, I believe. So anyways, he's there.
Sorry, I don't think we can actually see all of your presentation. I think we're just seeing the first slide of your presentation for some reason.
Let's stop it. Thank you. Did you see the second slide?
Okay, there we go.
All right. Maybe as I said, I'm not super
That is okay.
fluent in Zoom. Okay, so you can see that. The
Yes.
basic, okay, so the experience needed, and then
Yes,
can
there
you
we
see
go.
these guys? Okay, so here's what I do and don't do for visuals. Okay. Other equipment that assistive technology professionals deal with are standards, specialized bathing equipment, activity chairs, especially for children in schools, making sure that they can access both the environment with their peers on the floor as well as with their peers at a table level. Assistive and augmentative communication, AAC. I said that backwards, augmentative and alternative communication. So this is a area of practice that we have to know about in order to pass our exam, but I am not specialized in it. Actually, the most experience that I have of it is through being an occupational therapist and having experience with Toby and Dynabox. But you can see that it's just kind of a visual of what we do deal with as a profession. So I can talk from about my experience. Do you guys have any questions thus far? Do you want to just let me keep rolling? All right. Well, I'll keep rolling then. So as I said, I was an occupational therapist for about 12 years. I dealt with everything. If you ever want any to talk about different fields, I've actually practiced in almost all of them. I was a traveling occupational therapist. I've done acute rehab. I've done subacute rehab. I've done outpatient. I've done long-term acute care. I've done school systems. I've done mental health extensively. And then I landed at a long-term acute care practice. And that's how I got actually to being an ATP. So I actually hurt my back doing a wheelchair evaluation. I highly recommend against it. Always protect your back. There were some extenuating circumstances, and unfortunately, I was unable to practice occupational therapy anymore because of the lifting component. So I had a few avenues open to me that did not involve lifting, and I actually came into this field at the recommendation of my ATP, who was helping me with the wheelchair evaluation. And it's been absolutely wonderful. I get to enable people's independence. I get to meet and have that client contact. I get to see what their daily life looks like. I get to make recommendations for their environments and for their person and for their needs. And so I feel very blessed that I was still able to maintain my OT self within a different profession. It's been amazing. So typically, I have an atypical job, but typically an ATP would go to a person's home or go to a wheelchair clinic, and they would be a resource with a therapist. So a therapist would be doing an evaluation, identify the need for, let's say, a wheelchair, and then they would call their assistive technology professional, their ATP. They would call them in for the actual prescription of equipment and demonstration of equipment in order to meet needs and get all of the paperwork associated with that. The ATP then coordinates with the manufacturer, and they basically marry equipment. So you might get, say, a Permobil or a Quantum wheelchair. You'll get a Motion Concepts backrest. You'll get a Sunrise J cushion. And you marry all that equipment to meet the specific needs of your patient. And then you would also coordinate the insurance piece of it. And speaking of pros and cons, pros, you get to enable independence. You get to deal with really cool equipment. You get to be creative. You get to really delve into the nitty-gritty of what your patients need and what would benefit them the most. But then you also get to deal with insurance. And as an OT, it was really great to say, this is what my patient needs. This is what my client needs. But as an ATP, it's really difficult because then you get to see the backside, which is, well, your insurance won't pay for that. So we need to find a way to get this for you, whether that be applied to grants or scholarships, or whether that is doing a GoFundMe page. So you get to be creative in two realms, not only with the equipment, but also with funding at times. So the pros are, you get to enable independence. The cons are, you have to deal with the business side of things, if you will, which is the interactions with the insurances and making sure that people have all the resources that they need to maintain their equipment, to get repairs paid for and such. And a lot of times that means that the ATP has a lot of face time with doctors' offices and such in order to get the paperwork done to the specifications of the insurances. I kind of put on what are the impacts of providing CRT, because I didn't want to forget to tell you how cool it is. You get to deal with all the fun stuff. So I made a couple cool stuff slides just so that you guys get to see where we get to shine, where we get to be the most creative. We make sure that people's mobility equipment interacts with their car. We provide environmental control units. Can you see these slides? Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure. So you get to see you could see people who otherwise did not have the capability of turning on their own TV be able to do that. People who thought they would never be able to drive again because they can't get into the driver's seat of a car, or maybe their hands don't function, they can drive. And you get to really be creative with those solutions. Or maybe if you look towards the bottom in the middle, the person who's having extreme shoulder pain, you get to say, hey, there exists a mobility device that goes on the back of your manual wheelchair where with a couple taps, it will propel you, especially for long distances. And it saves your shoulders by limiting the number of pushes that you need to do per day. Or, hey, do you want to go out and explore the wild, but you're in a power wheelchair? You can. There are things for that. Here's some other cool stuff that we do. The top left is a freewheel device, which makes a basic high-end manual wheelchair. It makes it into an off-roading wheelchair. So people can still go hiking, even if they're in a manual wheelchair. We deal with sports equipment. So we do basketball and rugby and tennis, and we do very specific wheelchairs for this guy who's upside down. He is basically a skateboarder, if you will, but he does it in a wheelchair. If you actually Google him, he's really cool to watch, and he's really dangerous. So be careful. You don't want to watch it around small children. It can be a little devastating. He does get bloodied sometimes. But we get to be creative with our mobility solutions. So a wheelchair really should not ever be a symbol of disability. It should be a vehicle to liberation and freedom and independence. And that's me. What questions do you guys have?
Hi, my name is Catherine.
Hi, Catherine.
I have a question. I am my last couple of months until I'm done, so I really wanted to join in and listen in. But one thing is, typically, what settings do you do your assessment? You mentioned home health, but are you ever referred by outpatient, or is it primarily home health?
So the general ATP population that specializes in wheelchairs, we have a few clinics. So there's, are you in Denver, Colorado?
No, I'm in California, actually.
In California. Okay. So I won't make any specific references, but there are wheelchair clinics. And a lot of times, especially like there's Ranchos Los Amigos, you know that in California, hopefully you guys have heard of that in the scale. There are wheelchair clinics at big university hospitals. There's usually clinics kind of in bigger metro areas. There will be a couple clinics that pop up. Usually it's associated with some sort of hospital. I actually practice inside of a hospital. I only deal with one hospital. It's a large rehabilitation hospital called Craig Hospital. And I actually am exclusive to that account, if you will. But there's also a lot of pediatric things that I don't normally do on a daily basis, but they do go into schools as well.
Okay, another question I had, sorry.
Yeah.
If I was working in a clinic or hospital that isn't quite familiar with this, how do I either introduce it or provide resources for them to look further into this? Or is this sort of a standardized thing that most places would have?
So how would you get a hold of an ATP if you needed one? Is that kind of what
Yeah.
you're asking?
Yes, or maybe if, say, their setting doesn't necessarily aren't always creative and thinking of, oh, okay, we could do this.
Mhm.
Because, some of my experiences, I think I've been lucky enough to have had field work where they do offer it.
Right.
But I'm also aware that a lot of hospitals or smaller clinics aren't aware of these types of resources. So my question is, what would be either your advice for someone who's new to kind of introduce it to a team that maybe has not been familiar with it?
Okay, very good question. Usually people either know of a very local mom and pop shop or they know of a national company. So I work for New Motion. There exists National Seating and Mobility, and then there's another large one on the East Coast that I'm not sure of their name, but those companies in our industry, when I first started in wheelchairs in like 2004, it was a lot of mom and pop shops. It was one owner owns like a small little wheelchair house, if you will, and does backrests from sawing down wood. Well, we don't do that anymore, and unfortunately reimbursement has been negatively impacted by the lack of funds in our healthcare system. And so big fish eats little fish kind of thing. And we have come to the point where there's basically three big names in wheelchairs. And then there are a couple mom and pop shops that still exist. But generally speaking, you can Google it. If you know New Motion and you know National Seating and Mobility, I bet you one of them or both of them are very close to you and can be your greatest resource. And from there, choose the person that you have the best relationship, the one that you trust the most. One company isn't necessarily better than the other. It's kind of like therapists. One person really makes that difference.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What other questions do you guys have? I've been an OT for a very long time, so I can answer anything.
Do you feel that you run into a lot of instances where things aren't going to be covered by insurance, or do you find that a lot of times they are covered by insurance and very rarely do you have to apply for grants or scholarships?
Usually basic pieces of equipment are covered. There are certain insurances, and as an ATP, you have to be an insurance expert, because when you come to a wheelchair evaluation, you should be able to tell that person up front that will likely not be covered or that likely will be covered. So if you ask me, like if you told me your insurance and asked me if they would pay for an ultralight manual wheelchair, I would say yes. If you told me your insurance and said, well, they cover that freewheel attachment that goes on the front, I would say probably not. And then you seek other funding. There are, unfortunately, there are the insurance piece of it. There are people who review that do not know much about the technology and can make mistakes. And so that's really when you get into tight situations where somebody who needs, say, tilt on their power wheelchair, it's denied. Why? Because they didn't have a qualifying diagnosis, or that diagnosis was left out of the paperwork, or the person just didn't see it. So it can be a little bit sticky, but in general, when your ATP comes to help you with a wheelchair evaluation, they should be able to guesstimate what that person would and would not have covered for sure.
Thank you.
So, how does it work out in terms of the quality of life? In your slides, you showed pictures of people in wheelchairs so they can engage in, like their occupations like skateboarding and things like that, right? Going off-roading. How do you justify that to insurance so that they can have those kinds of, I guess, like the materials, the assistive device?
Good question. Insurances, unfortunately, are pretty brutal. They will pay for what is necessary for your basic ADLs inside of your home. So if you need a power wheelchair, almost all insurances, I know one insurance out of the entire nation that would not cover a power wheelchair. And most insurances would cover a manual wheelchair, but they will only cover what you need for inside of your home for your basic mobility related ADLs. So does it help you cook, clean, go to the bathroom, get a shower, and get around your house? Yes. Do you need that freewheel attachment so you can go enjoy a hike? No. And that's where we get stuck, because as OTs, we fully believe that that is an absolute necessity for a good quality of life. But the insurance likely will not pay for it. There are some insurances that do, but they would be like a workers' comp or like a Medicaid. So Medicaid in most states will pay for a little bit more than basic group insurances like Blue Cross Blue Shield or Cigna or Kaiser, because they understand that the people who are on Medicaid cannot afford things outside of their home as well. And many Medicaids do value what happens outside of the house. Can we get you to work? Can we get you to your day program? Can we get you to church? Some people can't afford that, and those people likely are Medicaid. Therefore, they provide a little bit more, and like a freewheel device or that little motor that goes on the back of the wheelchair, they will pay for that. And if you need that little motor in the back of your wheelchair for inside the home, most insurances actually will cover it.
I have
Alright.
another one.
Okay.
That one. Are there specific, maybe standardized assessments that you would use? I know you said there are different types of ATPs. Oh, that's what it's called, right? ATPs?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. I wrote that down. I was like, wait, that's energy. Is that? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, are there different standardized assessments that you would use? Or does
So
it?
here, let me show you one. So is this kind of what you're asking for?
Yeah, that is it. Yeah.
Okay, so this one in particular is called the Houston Methodist Functional Mobility and Wheelchair Assessment. And it is a really thorough evaluation. So if you were doing a wheelchair evaluation and maybe didn't have the resources of an ATP who knows the therapy world well, this actually goes through every single aspect of a wheelchair that you would need to address. So their community, their home, if you go through it, you have your sitting balance, you have your standing ability, you have your cardiovascular. So does your person have a cardiovascular issue that prevents them from all day, every day being able to access their home? There is even skin issues right there. They address skin issues. So maybe your person is very functional, but they can't relieve their own pressure. Do they need assistance for that, such as a tilt, such as a recline system, that type of thing? So I think they go on to have a full Braden too. If you're familiar with the Braden scale, it's a risk for skin issues. So that was the latest addition, is they were going through skin issues, but not having enough detail in what was going on in that evaluation. And so they actually included a Braden scale. So you can show it takes a standardized test with a standardized objective number to relate to your subjective need for equipment.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. There's also, I can send it to you later. There's also some really cool resources on wheelchair assessments. So this is what you would fill out to tell an insurance that a person needs a piece of equipment. There's also like if you want to put some better data to it, or if you're having struggles, there is, have it somewhere, maybe University of Pittsburgh, I believe, has an entire website dedicated to mobility device related objective measurements. So there is probably a 6-minute walk test, if you will, on there. There's definitely a Berg, but there's also a carpeted single push test. There is basically a tug for, do you understand tug? Timed up and go
Yes.
for wheelchairs users. So there's a lot of assessments, and if you guys want that, I'm happy to pass that on, and so that you guys can see it. I don't know how I would do that, but I can definitely give it to you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course.
What role does ATP play with the geriatric population, like in an assisted living facility or just anywhere where the majority of the population is a geriatric population?
Very good question. So many people underserve the geriatric population, and I can go on my little soapbox, if you will. But basically, when they talk about high-end wheelchairs that exactly fit a person, what you're talking about is shoulder preservation. What you're talking about is energy conservation, right? And what do geriatric populations get? They get that chair that I showed up here that has a big old X through it. That one, that's what they get. That has no energy conservation. That is going to tear up their shoulders if they choose to use it. And the dimensions are such that they might not be able to use it. And so, but the general rule of thumb, most insurances follow Medicare rules or are easier than Medicare to get a chair. And the person has to be independent in use. Okay, so even in assisted living, if that person can get around their little assisted living apartment, they are independent in use. And are they highly active and independent? Those two words are really tough to define, because if you're 80, are you running a mile? No. But are you active in your community? Are you active in your home? Are you doing things for yourself? Active as it relates to an 80-year-old? Yes. Yes. You're getting to the bathroom yourself. You're getting to your sink. You're doing your own dishes. It doesn't have to be getting into a car, going to a concert, and staying up all night. That's not highly active and independent for an 80-year-old, but it is the definition of highly active and independent for somebody of that age. So is actually doing dishes and doing their own ADLs and such. So if you ask me on my little soapbox, I believe that most people in assisted livings and geriatric living environments, so senior living places, communities, they don't get the service that they need because people underrate what they can do and underrate what equipment is appropriate for them. Unfortunately, when you're talking about skilled nursing facilities or any facility that is charged with providing their patients equipment, you're never going to get anything covered in there unless your state Medicaid is really nice, but most don't. I can't come up with one state that does anymore. But if you are not in a facility, such as a skilled nursing facility, a nursing home, if you're in a group home, if you're in assisted living, if you are in a host home, all of those places, those people are not responsible for your equipment. Therefore, your insurance will pay for equipment. Okay? And they will pay for good equipment. And remember that, like your little granny's old shoulders need to be saved. If she doesn't qualify for a power chair and you want her in a manual chair, by golly, why would you put her in a manual chair that looks like that, is heavy, it's not made to her dimensions, will adversely affect her posture and her stability, and then end up causing further damage? You don't want that. And people don't actually look forward to that. They don't think there are any resources once you hit 80 years old. And I don't know why, because you should. You deserve it. You paid into it for long enough, and you can use it, and it will be beneficial for your health. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank
I
you
appreciate
so
your
much.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I think we're done with this meeting. Thank you guys so much for joining in. All right, guys. Thank you.